my talk, What the DLL, and I had you add in a fancy title there. Dom told me to do it. If you see Dom, he's trying to grow a beard. Just let him know that he's getting there and everything will be okay. So hashtag couldn't resist. So that's the title. Yay, this is actually working. Who am I? Yes, you can't not have a slide about this. So I'm an analyst at SensePost. They let me wear my cowboy boots and grow a beard, so that's pretty awesome. So I hack stuff there. I try to most of the times, but a lot of the times it's just bashing away firstly at a terminal with green text. So if any of you have any pointers, please let me know. I like to build stuff to hack stuff. Yes, I'm being really lame. I'm quoting my Twitter handle. But that really is one of the most favorite things that I find myself doing on a Friday night is building tools. Because like I said, I'm pretty lazy, and if I can automate something or make things a little bit quicker, I do it. So I like to build stuff to hack stuff. And then in my spare time, I like to try and grow a beard. On that note, there are some fantastic beards here, so well done. I'll be more than happy to discuss beard oils at a later stage, but not right now. And that's supposed to be flannel. I like flannel, cowboy boots, and moonshine. I think I was born in the wrong continent. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. You can find me there. If you don't know what those are, you might be in the wrong venue. But I think everyone's figured that one out. Cool, awesome. So I was once told by a very, very awesome speaker who's in this room today that a lot of talks should cover a story. And mine doesn't really have a story, but I just really like that photo because when I tried to take it, and actually my colleague this morning asked me, Chris, do you like to take photos? And I was like, well, I try to take photos. And if you know Daniel Cuthbert, our COO, he has fantastic hair and takes fantastic photos. So I try to take a photo. And when I took that photo, I was with an American, an Australian, and a South African. And no, this isn't a bad bar joke. Legit, we were having a beer in the bush. And we were with a game ranger, and this is in a game reserve. And I'm not going to try to do an Australian accent. I've been told I sound Australian when I go overseas, so I'll just speak normally for now. And he asked me, the sun's going down, and when sun goes down, that generally means that animals come out, like lions, or you're in the African bushveld. So he asked me, do you think we're safe outside here? I'm like, dude, I grew up on the east end of Johannesburg. My survival skills are that of fending off overgrown pigeons. So don't ask me, I'm not the right person. But I think there might be a snake or two out in the bush. And then we said, why don't we ask the game ranger? This is his threat area, that's his attack surface. So we said, what's the biggest threat? And he said, well, besides you guys over here and a cooler box full of beer, I'll probably say the Mozambican spitting cobras. So the point of that and that picture was that if in doubt, ask the experts. And a long time ago, I was looking how to tear apart Windows applications, and one of the things that I stumbled across was DLLs. Once upon a time, I used to develop applications, very terrible applications. That's why I break them now. I'm not good at building them. That's why I stick to hacking tools. And I stumbled this thing across DLLs, and essentially it's a bag of bits. And what really got me interested in them was that they can be invoked or used at runtime. Now, from someone who's built a couple of applications along the years, you know that you don't want to reinvent the wheel, and of course, you use a library of sorts. Whether it's a Maven import or a header file, you want to reuse someone else's code. You want to use their wheel. You don't want to make your own. That stuff's hard. So if it's a solved problem, awesome, reuse it. But what's even better is that if you can do it at runtime, so you don't have to compile. You just make your application. You say, use that thing, use that piece of code at runtime. And when I was just trying to break a lot of thick apps, especially on the Windows platform, I realized, well, hold on now. So if I tell another application to use this bag of bits, I don't have to recompile the application. It just uses it at runtime. And that's when I would say the Spidey sensors started tingling. I was like, hold on now, this seems really cool. So then I researched a little bit. I Googled frantically until I was on page 4 of results, and every result was in purple. So then I know my research was done. So what was the vulnerability? And the vulnerability that really got my interest was preloading, hijacking. There's a couple other names for it. I found this description, which is probably violating every rule for a good presentation, because there's probably too much text, so I do apologize for the presentation gurus, but I just couldn't resist. So that describes it better than how I would probably say it right now. So I'll give you 5 seconds to read it, and then it can get awkwardly silent, because this is quite important. I was just hoping for the awkward silence, but you broke it, Shell. Watching a movie. And then it's that. So the vulnerability preloading is that essentially we can trick applications into loading our DLLs, which is really cool because if an application wants to use library X, and library X calculates pi to 40 digits, we can say, don't use that library. Nobody wants to use that. And just load my library, which will give me a shell on your machine. So that's what got me interested. And this was the vulnerability that I started to look at. And of course, yes, a bit of history. Like I said, I think the memes took me more time than the presentation itself. I mean, if I'm going to make you guys read text, at least give you guys a good meme here and there. So I tried. So DLL preloading has been around since at least 2010. It's not new. DLL preloading or hijacking attacks, it's been around for ages. Before I even had a beard, or probably most of you even had a beard. They've been around. More notably, if you Google that advisory, that's one of the earliest ones that I could find from Microsoft. They were aware that this was being used in the wild for a whole bunch of their products. So it's been around for quite some time. And there's multiple attack vectors to abuse this vulnerability. So either via directories, so you can abuse certain directories. If you have access to certain directories, you can get applications to load your DLL, which can result in shells, anything malicious that you want. Certain registry entries that can be manipulated in order to trick applications into looking or loading DLLs from certain directories. And then, of course, you can literally just replace a DLL and rename it, and the application will load that at runtime. So there's quite a few places. In my case, I'm looking at directories. Why? Well, I think I'm probably not the only one who sees the Windows registry and just kind of... And then, of course, just replacing DLLs, well, I don't know, that just kind of seemed like taking a hammer to a wall, which is cool for the first 5 minutes, but yeah, it gets a bit boring. So there are a lot of fixes for this along the way, and I just put arrows, so look above. In terms of fixing what directories can be read, so the search order, which we'll look at in a bit, registry entries that can be locked down. So there have been some fixes in order to try and prevent this problem from happening. And I say problem because you'll see by the end of this, some people think it's a problem, some people don't. Personally, I think it is a bit of a problem. So what? So we have DLLs, we have a vulnerability of sorts, which is relatively simple to exploit in terms of executables. I would say it's probably one of the hello world vulnerabilities that if you want to start tearing apart thick applications, this is very fun to get started with. And of course, why I like it is that it can give you persistence on a box. It can allow you to escalate privileges. And of course, if you have a host that is executing your code, it can allow you to have remote code execution on that host, which a lot of times I find quite useful in terms of post-exploitation. You want persistence, and of course, you want to escalate your privs, which is quite useful at times. And we have the Windows operating system, which I'm sure a lot of us over here love to pick on. And we've been testing this through 7 to 10. I left out Vista, well, because Vista is just the ugly child that everyone likes to ignore, so I'm just ignoring Vista there. But 7 to 10 DLLs are used probably before at some point. But that's what we have. And now, what do we do? Couldn't resist, sorry. There was actually a War Games reference there, but I figured, you know what, after watching War Games last night, it was really awesome. Can't not have a hacker's reference. So of course, we've got this vulnerability. It's pretty easy to exploit. It's all over Windows. Let's go ahead and hack everything. I mean, I don't know if anybody here, first time they figured out SQL injection, what did they do? Yeah, O'Neill became a very popular surname in Southern Africa. So let's just go ahead and hack everything. So how do we exploit this? So first of all, you have to identify the DLLs utilized by an application. To do this, there are multiple ways to skin this cat. Everybody familiar with that saying, skin the cat? Just checking. I once spoke to some people, and I mentioned that, and I got a very serious look, and I think they thought that I meant that they must go and skin a cat. It was probably a cultural mishap. I'm like, no, it's just the saying where I come from. On the East Rand, we're a bit weird. But basically, I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this. So Windows Debugger, Process Explorer, Procmon, the import address table, p-executables, which is static analysis. So there's multiple ways to do this. First thing, after this step, so the second thing, you want to identify DLLs that do not make use of fully qualified paths. So basically, you want to find DLLs that are being referenced and they don't have the path C:\Windows /system32 / blah, 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 blah. You want to find the DLLs that just say directory /mood.dll. Why? Because when DLLs are not referenced with a fully qualified path, it tells Windows to go look for the DLL, which is the search order. And that is what we abuse. Because the first thing Windows does is it looks in the current working directory of the executable and a few other directories along the way, where I mentioned registries, so on and so forth. So, as an example, I skipped ahead, multitasking, pressing buttons, reading slides. I'm still trying to get there. But this is not what you want to see. You want to leave that DLL alone. This is the one that you want to target, because those are the DLLs that will trigger the search order. Then once you have that, you want to enumerate the target DLLs. I used to say the word fuzz, but then my Egyptian colleague schooled me on the art of fuzzing, so I then called it enumerating, which I think is a more adequate term. So thank you, Saif, for that. So after that, you want to place your malicious DLL in the current working directory of the executable. There are other ways to exploit this, but that's the directory that I was focusing at. So if you know that this is the DLL, you rename your malicious DLL, which you can create multiple ways, place it in the directory of the executable, and it would look like this pretty much. If this is your target executable, you would put your DLL in that directory. And once you have that, you run target.exe, and then you wait for calc. So I think it's quite simple. I think it may be relative, but I saw this and I was like, this is quite lacquer. I can do a few things with this. And then, of course, you can wash, rinse, repeat that process. I was like, I can't quite make that facial expression. Maybe after some Tears of the Hipster, which is a great beer, by the way. Thank you, Cape Town, for that. But we can repeat this. And when I wanted to repeat this, I first looked and I said, okay, well, what's out there already? Because I don't want to reinvent the wheel. I'll just see what that wheel's like and maybe polish it a bit and be like, okay, that's cool. I can use that. So H.D. Moore, quite prevalent in the security field. Everybody heard of H.D. Moore? So he did quite a bit of research on DLL preloading hijacking. If you look at the online research, he was pretty much one of the first guys to speak about this. And he created a DLL hijack audit kit. Say that 5 times faster. I can't. So basically, this kit allows you to identify DLLs that may be preloadable. It's a whole bunch of scripts. You use Procmon. And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, this seems like a little bit too much work that I'm willing to put into to identify DLLs that I can hijack. So a collection of scripts, like I said. And of course, there's that manual process that I mentioned before. After scanning the intertubes and trying to find out, that approach came out. And of course, H.D. Moore's collection of scripts. So yeah, the manual process. So it's not uncommon for applications to have a lot of DLLs. So for example, if an application has about 100, it takes about 2 minutes to do each DLL. You're looking at maybe about 2 hours. And I don't know, that just seems a lot. Like, why can't we just automate it, get something else to do it, and let's make it a bit quicker? So I was like, no, this manual process doesn't make sense. And even what's out there isn't just, it's not satisfying my craving for efficiency. So basically, came up with Rattler. So rattle something and you see what comes out. That was the hoping for it. Like I was speaking to someone earlier, a good hacking tool has to have an awesome name and really good ASCII art. I was just betting on the name. So, yeah. So it's a Windows executable, supports 32 and 64 bits. Thank you, Visual Studio, for that. Written in delicious C++. I'm just going to add a little bit of sarcasm there because, yeah, pointers, pointer arithmetic, C++. Reminds me why I'm not a dev. 2 inputs at this moment in time, the path to the executable that you want to target. So if you have wordpad.exe or organizationx.exe and you want to see if you can DLL hijack this executable, you give the fully qualified path. And then of course the mode, in this case Rattler has 1 mode, which I'll talk about a bit later. So it's 2 inputs, keep it nice and minimal, no ASCII art. It automates the manual process that I mentioned earlier. So I see processes and I'm like, let's automate it, and then it'll twitch afterwards. It will identify exploitable DLLs such that if an application is vulnerable, Rattler will give you the name of the DLL, and that is the name that you will give your malicious DLL that you'll need to place in the current working directory for the executable. That's what Rattler will tell you. Give you the name and the path as well of the vulnerable DLL, and what you'll see is that a lot of DLLs come from System 32. It's quite rare that we find actually custom DLLs for the actual application itself, which is quite interesting. And there you go. There's the path for GitHub. I hit the big red button just before the talk to make it public. If there are any C++ gurus, I really appreciate your help to clean it up. So yeah, that's where it is. It's on GitHub. And that's what it looks like when you start it. 2 inputs. Sorry, the one got cut off. I blame Reveal.js. The border cut it out. Really, Reveal.js, really, you had one job. I'm joking. Anybody else using Reveal.js for presentations? Okay, so I went full hipster then. Okay, I was trying to avoid that for today. And then, of course, these are the results. I'm sorry if you are colorblind. I did not think about that. But if anybody is good at creating color output, I'd be more than happy to address that GitHub issue. So, example here, Rattler will tell you, cool, this application that we've tested, the results, if you were to place a malicious DLL called cryptsp.dll, ironically cryptsp, in the working directory of that executable, your payload will be executed. So, why I use it? So you might be asking why there's a picture of an inbred kitten. Same reason why I use Rattler. So for any of you who are laughing now, the internet's been around for a while. So why I use it? Because I can and because someone could do that, so I can use Rattler as well. So, automation. Automation, it's been fun. You give it the target, executable, you hit enter, go watch some Netflix, make a cup of coffee, come back. Oh, cool. Okay, those DLLs I can use to exploit that application. Persistence. So you're on a host and you want persistence. There are multiple ways. What I like to do is identify the applications installed on the host, and if any of them are vulnerable to DLL preloading, I will then drop a payload and exploit a vulnerable DLL. And whenever that application is run, my payload will then be executed as well, which is quite nice. Sometimes DLL preloading attacks will crash the application depending on the usage of the DLL. Sometimes it doesn't. So you got to check that beforehand. So I drop a DLL, and basically whenever that executable is run, whether it's a service or by the user, my payload is executed as well. It's been quite handy. Privilege escalation, wow. Well, what do we know about hacking? Generally, if you exploit something, you will generally inherit the permissions of that entity. So if you hijack an application that runs as admin, what do you think permissions you're going to get? Admin. Bug bounties. Yes, the bug did bite. Yes, I must apologize for the bad jokes. I should have actually apologized earlier, but yeah, too late for that. For fun, of course. I mean, who doesn't like hacking stuff and getting a shell? I still get excited about that. And of course, curiosity. One of the biggest questions that I asked myself from this research was, well, if this is from 2010, well, why is it still happening? We know that vulnerabilities are still happening from years ago, but I was curious. I was like, okay, well, it doesn't seem that hard to exploit or fix, so I was very curious about this. And of course, Gauteng journeys, those of you up in Gauteng know that it can get a little bit boring, and of course, nothing better than sitting next to a fellow hacker on the Gauteng. I was actually made a reference to a hacker that unfortunately couldn't be here today, but we had a lot of fun on the car train, you know, nice 40 minutes. Like, yeah, you want to see some shells? Oh, cool. So we had a lot of fun with that. And yeah, if he watches this presentation, he'll know that that reference is for him. Yes. Yeah. Hashtag couldn't resist. Could not resist. I've had some screenshots. I've had some bad jokes. Obviously want to see Rattler in action. So I resisted the urge to sacrifice a hipster last night, so the demo gods might or might not be on my side, but I think all of you seem quite cool. No one's thrown something at me yet, so hopefully the good vibes will keep on going. So in terms of the demo, we're going to identify some vulnerable DLLs, we're going to get some code execution, we're going to get a shell back, fun times, we're going to elevate some privs, and then of course I've tested this up until patched Windows 10. I've used this on Windows 7, 8.1. Please go ahead and run this on as many different kinds of machines as you can. What you'll see, what's quite interesting, is that depending on the operating system, some DLLs appear to be vulnerable, some don't. So if you are going to use this in the wild, run your test cases on the operating system that you are targeting. And then, yeah, we're going to use a vanilla MSF Venom DLL payload. Vanilla out the box, nothing fancy there. And cool, so that was my slide to remind me to go do the demo. So now it's the demo time, and there's probably going to be a couple minutes of awkwardness, of silence. I don't know, I find silence a little bit awkward at conferences. Maybe that's just me. So we've got a Windows machine over here. No, I don't want that to expand. Oh, why am I looking now? I've got split screens. Conference pressure, what can I say? So I have Rattler over here. Let me see if I can make that font a little bit bigger. Properties, yes. Font 28. Is that all right? Everyone see that? Cool, I got a thumbs up from the back, so that's good news. So Rattler's two binaries, and then of course there's a payload.dll. In this case, this payload just pops up calc. And as Rattler is running, I'll explain to you exactly what it's doing. So you just got to run one of these, one of the two binaries, and just make sure that payload.dll is in the directory of Rattler. And in this case, so I made a little cheat sheet. Yeah. So we are going to target wordpad.exe. We want to see if this is vulnerable to anything. So we're going to say Rattler 32. We're going to paste. I say the Windows 10 command line is slightly better. Control V actually works now. Instead of right click and just hoping something happens. And then the mode. So in this case, I'm running Rattler as admin, depending on the application, because we will want to place files in the CWD, the current working directory, for wordpad.exe. I know some of you might be saying, okay, you need admin to do this and whatever, but hopefully the point will be made later. So I'm going to run it. So what Rattler does in the beginning, fires up the application. So beforehand, you need to make sure that the application that you are targeting is not running, please. Otherwise, you'll get some weird errors like that. That is not correct, and it's probably because I'm running the 32-bit, but that's all right. I have a backup. So what I'm going to do here is target a installer, and we'll come back to that. Like I said, conference pressure. It's probably because I didn't run the 64-bit. But we have two installers over here. And what's interesting about the downloads directory is that it's untrusted. So I can go ahead and basically create a file, and I don't have to be admin or anything. If you were to try to drop a file in program files or somewhere under C, you would get UAC saying, you need permissions to do this. In the downloads folder, no, you don't. And these are the two latest .NET SDK installers. One is the web installer, and one is the offline installer. And I'm going to want to enumerate this one over here. So I'm going to say properties, and I'm going to copy that. So Rattler 32. It got me there. Windows got me there. Paste that. Say 1. Close that. Okay, holding thumbs. Maybe I should have sacrificed the hipster. I don't know. It's not too late. Okay, anybody wearing skinny jeans? Yeah, everyone keeps their hands down. Cool. So what Rattler is doing now, it'll run the application just to get a handle on all the DLLs. And what it'll do, it'll just go through and enumerate every single one that's in there. Not the most efficient, which we'll see. And this is going to happen a lot for a couple of minutes. So it's going to go through every DLL. And what's interesting is that there's currently a bug, such that Rattler will tell you that empty DLL is vulnerable. It's not. It's on my to-do list to figure that one out. But it'll run, it'll go through, and hopefully we'll see calc pop. So if anybody's wearing skinny jeans now, I suggest you leave the room. Might have to get that sacrifice going. And what Rattler will do is that the payload triggers calc to be executed. And what Rattler will do, it'll place the DLL, whatever we're trying to enumerate, it'll run the application, and it'll then look for the existence of calc. So please don't have calc running also when you run Rattler, because then everything's going to come up. It'll look for the presence of that process. If calc exists, and that's another interesting error that I'll discuss now, if it runs the target executable and if calc appears, Rattler then knows that that DLL that it placed can then be used for DLL preloading. So it's quite a rudimentary way of checking, and I found it quite useful. So there we go. Crypt sp.dll is vulnerable for this app. And what's very cool about this and lots of other installers, and I challenge you to go run these on installers, is that you'll notice that there are a lot of common DLLs vulnerable according to the technologies used. So this is a Microsoft product, and this DLL is vulnerable. So does anybody think that it's only this installer that is vulnerable to crypt sp.dll? You can shake your head, it's fine. I won't do mine too hard because I'm scared this cool thing over here is going to fall off. So now we have that. Rattler's now told us, okay, that's the DLL that is vulnerable. This is a very cool error. Can anybody tell me what this error might be from? So the payload that it uses, it hooks into the DLL main entry point. Remember I said DLLs are runtime, so there has to be some form of API. The application has to have some predefined way to know how to communicate to the DLL, and vice versa. There has to be some predefined, established conditions. One of the entry points for DLLs is the DLL main. You can add custom ones. So this is actually part of future work, and if you see this error, it means that the DLL was preloaded, but the DLL provided did not have the entry points that the application was looking for. So that's also on my to-do list. Some people say to-do, but I think to-do just sounds, I don't know. I think it sounds slightly better. Okay, so now we have a vulnerable DLL. So what do we do now? We want a shell. So in this case, I have a DLL aptly named beard.dll. It's an MSF Venom vanilla DLL. That's all that it is. So just to make sure that this application is vulnerable, I'm going to copy this into downloads. I'm going to put it over here. You see no UAC, no nothing. I can just copy paste to this directory because no one ever has 1,000,001 installers in their downloads folder ever. No, not at all. So I'm going to rename it to cryptsp.dll. I'm going to run the installer. Yes, I would like to run this installer. Okay, boom, there you go, we've got calc. Okay, so some manual verification. That's just OCD Chris saying just manually verify. Thank you, that's very kind of you. That was very nice, thank you. It's nice when people are nice. Okay, so now we have that. So let's put a payload in. So before we do that, also just for demonstrative purposes, using old Kali 1, still my favorite Kali, very little RAM to use. I have a multi-handler, so we can just show options here. Okay, so multi-handler, payload, Windows Meterpreter, reverse TCP. Standard, running as a job, waiting for a connection back. Let me put this over here. Great stuff. So we now know that cryptsp.dll is the one we want to target. I have my payload on desktop, so I'm going to go there. I'm going to paste that. I'm going to rename that back. I'm sure there's a much more efficient way of doing this. I apologize. Okay, so I'm just going to say, because you only listen once. Okay, great stuff. So we now have our payload called cryptsp.dll. I'm now going to run the installer. Yes, I would like to give you admin permissions. Okay, interpreter session, and we got Windows just happily dying somewhere on the inside that I'm sure of. So we say sessions -r1. Cool, so now we've got an interpreter. Woohoo, yay, fun times. There was a webcam. We're going to do an Alice, and blah, blah, blah. Cool, awesome, we're in the downloads folder. And now we have a shell. But, what if I maybe wanted to, do some other stuff? For example, maybe invoke Mimikatz or something. Can anybody tell me what I might need to take that further? So I'm that person now. But when we hack, we want to be overlord. Yes, we want to be the alpha user. So let's just use vanilla get system. And I should probably make that a bit bigger. Get system, and now we can just say get UID. And there we go. Elevated some privs. What I've done in the wild here is I've dropped DLLs in download folders, and I know that cryptsp.dll will most likely affect most Microsoft installers. Not all, but some. You can go ahead and drop it in the downloads folder, and if either the user does run that installer, you're going to get that. Or if you have some other way of executing the installer, you're going to inherit the permissions of that installer. Now, previously when I ran wordpad.exe in that first little failure there, you wouldn't be able to get system wide because wordpad.exe is not given those permissions. But what is quite interesting, and that I found with another useful way, is that I have the exes. So these are from Windows, so program files, Windows NT accessories, so wordpad.exe and wabmig.exe. These are some accessories. So if I know that this application is vulnerable to MSFT edit, so I ran Rattler against wordpad.exe, and I copied the executable to my desktop here, and I know that beer.dl is my payload. So I'm first going to check calc, rename that. I'm going to run WordPad. Oh, .dl. Thank you. Peer review. What would I do without it? Okay, there we go. So sometimes with applications, they don't have to reside in their original directory in order for them to be vulnerable. Here I've taken out wordpad.exe, dropped in the desktop, and it seems that wherever you put WordPad or wabmig, wherever you put it, and if you drop a DLL called Microsoft edit.dll, your payload will be executed. It might be useful at some point. So that I found to be quite fun, and that then finishes the demo part. So how are we doing on time there, Yeston? 7 minutes, perfect, so I can show you guys some more really bad memes, which I do have. Awesome, so thank you for your patience. Observations, what is the point of this all? So I did some bug bounties to draw some statistics about this, because I had this tool, just automated this task. I was like, cool, well, let's go find which vendors have bug bounties and have thick apps. So 11 submissions, 8 kudos, so that's the term now in bug bounties, where people said, yes, that is a problem, we will try and fix that. And I emphasize try, because what a lot of organizations have realized is that the tools that they are using to create the applications are susceptible. For example, installers. I mean, who here has created their own installer? You guys are way better developer than I ever will be. But some of us who are not capable of creating our own, we use other technologies to create installers for us. and a lot of vendors have realized that the installers that these technologies create are susceptible to DLL preloading. There was a payout at this point, $200. Other testing, so I looked for apps outside of bug bounties because I knew bug bounties is cool, so there's a mandate to attack these apps, and let's see what these organizations say. Like, do they think it's a problem? I tested around 50 Windows apps. I went absolutely crazy with it. Submitted 8 disclosures. One said, yeah, no, that's a problem. Yeah, we don't want that. A cool company out of Silicon Valley, reason why I remember that, last night we were chatting to some dudes yesterday, and it was really cool. It actually quite surprised me. There was this little startup, not so little, in San Francisco, and I said, hey guys, your application is vulnerable to this, and they fixed it within 24 hours. Some of the other larger organizations just said, we are willing to accept this risk. And I'm like, cool, man. Yeah, you do that. Common vulnerable DLLs, so .NET installers. I urge you to go run this against, and you will see a lot of products, a lot of family of products, often have a common vulnerable DLL, which I found quite interesting. And of course, what's the solution? So fully qualified paths, and maybe some verification and validation of the DLLs that your application is using. And then someone suggested just not use DLLs. And then I kind of looked at them with that dev look, like, when someone, criticizes your code, you look at them, you're like, no. I got that look, and I don't know why. I guess removing DLLs out of the picture just doesn't make sense. Maybe a better implementation, I don't know. But the dev in me just loves runtime invocation of methods. Like, that just sounds really awesome. So conclusion, is this a problem? I'll leave this up to you guys to decide for yourselves. Why is this still a problem? So from 2010, this was common knowledge. Why is it still a problem now? Is it a symptom from a bigger problem? Is there some other big problem, some amorphous idea that we haven't quite grasped yet for that? And of course, what I often ask some people is like, do you want your code to be used for payload execution? So if there's a mega breach, and in the breach report it says, product X was used by the hackers to do X, Y, and Z. Do you want that? I don't know. I wouldn't personally want that to happen. Future work, so I'm sure everyone saw that error. That's due to the non-generic DLL entry point, the main entry point. So why? I want to allow Rattler to adapt and to inject to those custom entry points so we can get even more. So in this case, you know that that DLL is vulnerable. You just have to craft your payload to use the entry points that the application is using for that DLL. So slightly more work is on the Toto list. Faster enumeration times. For big applications, it takes around 10 minutes, which isn't bad, but let's make things quicker and faster. So maybe parallel enumeration might help. And then also, once again, thanks to Saif for this, great idea. The import address table analysis, which could be quite interesting. So only target the DLLs from that address table that are not using fully qualified paths. And then yes, that's my last point there. And this is actually my favorite part of the talk, and I'm sure we've got a minute or two later. But at the end of this, I was causing quite a lot of havoc with applications, and I suggested to Sense, I was like, hey, we're participating in bug bounties, and why don't you make the policy that let's donate to charity? Why? Well, just a personal motto is that if you can make the world a little bit of a better place, why not? And at Sense Post we are doing this, so I think bug bounties and charities, awesome idea. The proceeds, because go to charity, and let's just try and make the world a little bit of a better place in any way we can, besides just dropping O'Neill all over the planet. And that concludes my talk. That is the GitHub repo over there at the bottom. There is a blog post with slightly more information. It should be on. Rattler is public. It's all there. So if you want a little bit more info, or if you want some more in-text sarcasm, you know where to find it. And then, of course, here's some useful stuff that helped me along my way. That concludes my talk. Thank you so much for your attention and time.